So imagine this. You're on a flight, okay? New York to London. Pretty standard stuff, right?
Yeah.
You get on, find your seat, plane takes off, you land hours later, no drama. Your luggage is there, no one's pinched your spot. It just works. But
Yeah.
have you ever, stopped to really think about that? How many people, thousands, millions maybe, had to cooperate perfectly? Pilots, controllers, baggage handlers, people you never even see, all working together. Strangers, mostly. It's almost civilized. And that scale, that level of coordination among, well, total strangers doing all sorts of different jobs, you just don't see that anywhere else in nature. It's unique to us.
Exactly. And that right there, that's the puzzle we're tackling today. It's kind of amazing. How do humans manage this incredible scale of cooperation? What makes us so different from, well, every other animal out there? We're going to dig into the surprising links, between how we cooperate, how we learn from each other, and how our minds are actually set up for this. Think of it as a shortcut to understanding the hidden forces shaping our world.
That flight example is pretty striking for today. But let's rewind a bit. What about, say, early human societies? How did ancient farming communities pull off these massive projects? I mean, carving terraces, huge harvests, building granaries, running whole cities. That must have taken incredible coordination, right? Without iPhones and emails?
Right. Yeah, those agricultural feats, they really do demand a different kind of explanation. Hunter-gatherers, sure, they cooperated. Group hunts, sharing food, childcare, defending the group. That happened. But the scale needed for, building irrigation systems or city walls, that suggests something deeper was going on. It wasn't just small bands anymore. And it's really important to get past a common idea here. Kin selection. Helping your relatives because they show your genes. That's part of the picture, definitely. But it just doesn't stretch far enough to explain these huge projects involving loads of unrelated or maybe very distantly related people. Even if you look at modern hunter-gatherer groups who are relatively small, they already have lots of dealings with non-relatives. And those interactions, they're governed by, well, norms and institutions, their own rules. So it's clearly more than just blood ties driving this.
Okay, so if it's not all about family, what else could it be? I mean, history's full of examples of, let's say, less voluntary methods. Coercion, slavery. We know the Sumerians used slave labor way back, like 4000 BCE, to build cities. And there's the story in Exodus about the Egyptians enslaving the Israelites. Seems like a straightforward, if brutal, way to get big things done.
Well, coercion and slavery definitely happened, no doubt, and they're powerful ways to mobilize labor. But it can't be the whole story. Think about it. Even to manage a large street population, you first need a pretty high degree of cooperation within the ruling group itself. You need an army, right? Organized guards, administrators. That takes cooperation before you can even start coercing others effectively.
Ah, I see. So the cooperation has to come first, in a way.
Right, exactly. And actually, some historical research kind of turns the common picture on its head. Take the Egyptian pyramids, the really famous ones. The latest thinking, based on archaeological evidence like workers' villages and tombs, suggests they were built mostly by paid laborers. These were people, often from poorer families, who were apparently respected for their skills. Some who died on the job were even buried near the pharaohs. That doesn't really sound like typical slavery, does it?
Wow, no, that sounds more like, well, a job. A tough one, but a job.
Precisely. So what this suggests is that ancient societies, much like ours today, and even like those hunter-gatherer groups, relied heavily on voluntary cooperation. Most people were willing participants. Which brings us back to the big question. How is that possible? If it's not just about genes and family, and it's not all about force, what else is there? This really points towards something fundamental about how we learn from each other.
Okay, this is fascinating. So voluntary cooperation is key. But how did it get started on such a massive scale? You mentioned social learning, and you said one of the first steps is something maybe we don't think of as cooperation, teaching.
That's a really crucial piece and, yeah, often overlooked. Teaching, if you define it simply as behavior that helps someone else learn something useful, is a form of cooperation. It provides a benefit, and natural selection would favor it for that reason. The theoretical work strongly suggests that this kind of teaching ability evolved alongside what we call cumulative culture, as useful knowledge built up over generations, like really tricky stuff, how to make sophisticated tools or the best way to track down honey. There was a huge advantage to being able to pass that information on effectively.
So teaching helps culture build up, and culture makes teaching valuable. A feedback loop.
Exactly. And you can easily imagine this starting within families, right? Parents teaching kids how to find food, siblings showing each other how to knap flint, keeping that valuable know-how close.
Okay, that makes sense for close kin. But how do you get from teaching your kid to, well, cooperating on that flight to London with hundreds of strangers? How did teaching break out of the family circle?
Right, that's the next critical jump. And the key seems to be language. Language is a game changer for teaching. It just makes it so much cheaper, so much more efficient, and way more accurate. Imagine trying to explain how to build, say, a complex fish trap without words. It'd be incredibly difficult, slow, lots of errors.
Yeah.
But with language, suddenly you can explain things clearly. Instruction can spread beyond immediate family to more distant relatives, maybe even to neighboring kin groups. Think early human bands working together. This wider spread of know-how enabled more complex cooperation, coordinating big game hunts, defending against predators together, things needing more than just a few people.
So language is almost like a technology for scaling up cooperation.
In a way, yes, a huge amount of human cooperation absolutely depends on language. And there's a strong argument that language itself might have initially evolved because it made teaching so much more effective, boosting that cumulative culture. So the reason human cooperation is so, well, weird compared to other animals is largely down to teaching and language tools other species barely have or don't have at all.
Okay, language helps spread knowledge beyond the family, but societies aren't just about knowing how to do things. They're about rules, right? How we should behave. How did we get from just sharing skills to having actual societal rules?
That's the next really big evolutionary step.
Right.
Think about animal social learning again. Many species have traditions, chimps, using specific tools in one area but not another. Birds singing local dialects. These are like conventions, ways of doing things. Some of these might be picked up just by watching. But the harder stuff probably spread through teaching, mostly within families, as we said. Now, most animal teaching is just about creating a chance for the learner to figure it out. Like the meerkat giving its pup a disabled scorpion. Helpful, but hands-off. Very occasionally, you see hints of something more, maybe like coaching. A hen might peck the ground to distract chicks from bad food. It's sort of nudging behavior.
Okay, so it's subtle in animals. What did humans do differently?
The massive shift was when our ancestors started systematically correcting learners. Not just showing them how, but actively intervening when they did it wrong. It wasn't just, here's a way to do it. It became, this is the way you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that right there is the transition from simple conventions to norms.
Norms.
Yeah.
Like social rules.
Exactly. Norms dictate how you ought to behave, how to make a fire properly, how to share meat after a hunt, how to treat elders, eventually how to plant crops. And crucially, norms also specify what happens if you don't follow the rules. There were consequences. This completely changed everything. Hominin life went from just living near each other to actively identifying as a group, with shared rules, favoring insiders. Norms became the glue for coordinating action. They massively boosted a group's ability to work together. And eventually, society started making these norms explicit, writing them down as laws, setting up formal punishments. Think about traffic laws, tax laws, how banking works. It all relies on these agreed-upon, enforced norms. This system of socially learned and transmitted norms is why human cooperation goes way beyond just helping family or expecting a direct favor back.
Wow. So norms basically solve the problem of getting everyone on the same page, even in huge groups. How did that help with, like, those big ancient projects, getting thousands of people working together effectively?
Precisely. Coordinating really complex actions with lots of people doing different things. It's almost impossible without social learning, language, and teaching, all underpinned by norms. You see cooperation in other animals, sure. Lions hunting together, maybe musk oxen forming a defensive circle. But they rarely take on specialized, distinct roles that all fit together into a larger plan. There's no foreman directing the lion hunt.
Right.
You know?
They're mostly doing the same thing, just together.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But humans, using language and teaching, and just by creating these learning environments for each other, we can assign different jobs. We can train people for specific roles, the builders, the tool makers, the farmers, the managers. Experiments actually show how crucial language is for solving these kinds of coordination puzzles quickly and efficiently.
And this leads to things like apprenticeships, right? Passing on specialized skills.
Absolutely vital, especially when you get to early agricultural societies. Populations are booming. You need people doing different job specialists. How do you reliably pass on complex skills like metalworking or weaving or even being a priest or a scribe? You need long-term cooperative relationships, a master teaching an apprentice over years.
So you start getting professional teachers.
Exactly. It moves beyond just family members teaching useful tricks. You get experts, maybe priests teaching the elite, or military instructors, farming gurus, even dance masters who tutor unrelated people. And they do it in exchange for something: food, protection, status. It becomes a recognized role, crucial for maintaining the complex knowledge needed to run the society.
Okay, so norms and teaching help coordinate within a group. But what about cooperation between groups or between individuals who are basically strangers? How did language and teaching help bridge those gaps?
That's another huge expansion. Let's start with something like trade or mutualism. Animals have mutualisms, like we mentioned the oxpecker and the rhino, maybe baboons grooming each other. Both sides benefit simultaneously. But human-style trade, swapping different things, like a tool for some food, where the value isn't obvious or immediate. That's incredibly rare, maybe even non-existent, in other animals. People sometimes mention chimps trading meat for sex, but honestly, the evidence is pretty contested.
Why is that kind of trade so hard for other animals?
Well, think about it. It requires agreeing on an exchange rate. How many berries is this arrowhead worth? That's really, really difficult without language, even a simple one. Language makes negotiation possible. It allows for haggling, setting prices, building trust over transactions. This fosters division of labor, not just within a group, but between groups specializing in different things. And eventually, this complexity leads to things like money. Grain, cattle, then weights of metal like the shekel. These were all early forms of currency emerging thousands of years ago, stabilizing trade between people who didn't know each other personally. So again, you see norms, institutions, laws, all built on language, scaling up cooperation massively between non-relatives.
And what about helping someone just because they're known to be helpful to others? That seems like a very human thing.
That's indirect reciprocity. It's the idea of I help you because I know you help others. Building a reputation. It's debated if this truly exists in other animals, but theoretical models show it can work in humans, especially if people can track reputations. And how do you track reputations effectively in a large group? Gossip. Language is key. As the biologist Martin Nowak said, for indirect reciprocity to work, you need language, names, deeds, places, who did what to whom.
So gossip is actually crucial for cooperation.
It seems so. And finally, language allows for institutionalized punishment. Having verbally taught social norms means groups can collectively police free riders or rule breakers. Think about laws, police forces, courts. This kind of socially sanctioned punishment is much more stable and effective at maintaining cooperation than just individuals taking revenge.
Okay, this is building a really complex picture. Norms, language, teaching, trade, reputation, punishment, all scaling up cooperation. So how did societies with these effective cooperative strategies actually spread? This brings us to cultural group selection, right?
Exactly. This is a really powerful idea developed significantly by anthropologists Rob Boyd and Peter Richardson. The core concept is that natural selection doesn't just operate on genes, it can also operate on culture at the level of groups. Groups that happen to develop more effective cultural traits, better norms, institutions, technologies, social structures for cooperation tend to outperform groups with less effective traits.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Think about warfare. A society with norms and structures that allow for larger, more organized armies is more likely to win conflicts and expand, spreading its culture. Or think economically. A city-state that develops a sophisticated division of labor might outcompete its neighbors economically. An agricultural community that figures out large-scale irrigation will likely be more productive and support a larger population than one that doesn't. Even things like religious beliefs. If a religion includes doctrines that promote strong within-group trust and cooperation, that society might be more cohesive and resilient than one without such beliefs. The successful cultural package tends to spread.
So it's the group's way of doing things that gets selected for, because it helps the group succeed.
Precisely. And think about why agriculture is a good example. One single farmer working alone probably isn't much more productive than a hunter-gatherer. Agriculture really pays off when you have groups cooperating on large-scale projects, building those irrigation canals, clearing large areas of land, communal harvesting, building defenses. These are public goods that benefit everyone. Groups that manage this kind of collective action effectively will thrive and outcompete groups that remain less cooperative. Their cooperative culture gives them an edge.
Are there real-world cases of this?
Yeah, beyond just agriculture. There's a classic anthropological example of the Nuer and Dinka peoples in Sudan. They were neighboring cattle herders, often in conflict. During the 19th century, the Nuer expanded significantly at the expense of the Dinka. Researchers argue that this was largely because the Nuer social structure allowed them to mobilize much larger war parties. Their cultural organization gave them a military advantage.
And this kind of cultural group selection probably operated for a very long time, even on small-scale societies, favoring groups that were better at cooperative hunting or foraging or warfare.
What makes this cultural selection more likely than, say, genetic group selection, which is generally thought to be weak?
Several things make cultural group selection work much better. First, culture lets you learn from anyone, not just parents, and people tend to conform to what most others are doing locally. This keeps cultural practices distinct between groups. Second, if one group conquers another, the losers might adopt the winner's culture. This means migration doesn't necessarily dilute cultural differences the way gene flow dilutes genetic ones. Third, humans use symbolic markers, specific rituals, clothing styles, dialects, flags, to maintain group identity and boundaries. And fourth, as we discussed, institutionalized punishment helps maintain those cooperative norms even when individuals might be tempted to cheat. So all these factors make cultural group selection a much more potent force, and it helps explain why the big differences between human societies today are overwhelmingly cultural rather than genetic.
That's a huge idea. That culture itself is a driving force in evolution. But how did this feedback? Did all this cultural stuff actually change our basic psychology, our brains?
Absolutely. That's the core idea of gene-culture coevolution. It's not just culture evolving. Culture creates new selective pressures that can shape our genes. Our culture influenced our genetic evolution. So, living in these increasingly complex, cooperative, norm-based societies likely favored individuals with certain psychological traits. Some call this evolving a norm psychology. This means developing a whole set of mental tools adaptations specifically for dealing with social norms, being good at figuring out the local rules, internalizing them, caring about following them, noticing when others break them, and even feeling motivated to enforce them or punish violators.
So we're kind of hardwired to be rule followers, or at least rule aware.
There's strong theoretical backing for this. Once a species relies heavily on social learning and culture, selection is likely to favor specialized psychology to navigate that cultural world.
Can you give some examples of what this looks like in us? How does this norm psychology actually manifest?
Well, think about how quickly children pick up social rules, even subtle ones. We're very adept at inferring and adopting local norms, and we're also very sensitive to norm violations. We notice them and often feel disapproval or even anger. It might also have favored individuals who are more docile, maybe more inclined to conform, easier to integrate into these rule-bound societies, less likely to get kicked out or punished. Think about feelings like shame or guilt when we break a norm. Those emotions likely have an evolutionary basis linked to maintaining cooperation.
And it goes beyond just rules, right? You mentioned understanding others.
Yes, absolutely. Our unique ability to understand that others have goals, intentions, beliefs, what psychologists call theory of mind, is probably crucial for navigating a cooperative world. And our strong inclination to share experiences through things like joint attention, looking at the same thing together, cooperative communication, and teaching itself. All these seem like adaptations for a hypersocial cultural existence. There's even evidence suggesting a shift from the more competitive foraging styles seen in other primates towards more cooperative foraging in our ancestors, which implies selection for greater social tolerance, being able to hang out and work together without constant squabbling.
You mentioned imitation earlier, too. How does that fit into this evolved psychology? It seems like more than just copying.
It really is. Basic mimicry, copying someone's posture or mannerisms, often unconsciously is found in other animals and helps with skill learning. But in humans, it seems to have taken on this powerful social function. It acts like a social glue.
How so? A social glue?
Well, experiments show this fascinating two-way street. If someone subtly imitates you, say tapping their foot when you do, you tend to like them more, find them more persuasive, feel more rapport, and you actually become more cooperative towards them and even towards others afterwards.
Really? Just being mimicked makes you nicer?
It seems so. We see it even in toddlers. An 18-month-old is more likely to help an adult who has just imitated them. Adults who are mimicked donate more to charity. And it works the other way, too. We are more likely to automatically imitate people we like, people we feel cooperative towards, and especially people we see as being in our in-group, same religion, ethnicity, even just fans of the same sports team.
So imitation reinforces group bonds and cooperation.
Exactly. The psychologist Cecilia Hayes calls this a virtuous circle. Imitation boosts cooperation and affiliation, which in turn makes people more likely to imitate each other, strengthening group cohesion and helping maintain group boundaries. These subtle, shared mannerisms can spread through a group and become almost like unconscious ethnic markers.
That's fascinating. And can this be...
Well, that's part of the debate.
Hayes argues our imitation ability might be largely built through experience, honed by social interaction. But others argue there's a stronger innate component. Regardless, practices like synchronized dancing or military drills, which involve lots of rhythmic imitation, might actually enhance imitative skills and definitely promote bonding, perhaps through endorphin release or just associating the synchrony with positive group feelings. Using rhythm and music to coordinate big groups seems deeply human and likely tied to this.
Okay, so if our minds have been fashioned for culture, as the outline puts it, what are the key cognitive tools, the adaptations that make us such good social learners and cooperators? Can we list the strongest candidates?
Yeah, we can list some strong contenders for being evolved cognitive adaptations specifically for this cultural cooperative life. First, that generalized capacity for teaching. We talked about the motivation, the understanding of what the learner knows or doesn't know, language itself, especially if it co-evolved with teaching. Our tendency to use and respond to motherese or infant-directed speech, the very specific way adults talk to babies, seems geared towards facilitating learning.
What else?
The powerful drive to imitate and the social bonding it creates. How young children are obsessed with following other people's gaze and the motivation to share attention on the same object or event. Some even argue the white sclera of our eyes evolved to make gaze following easier. Our strong tendency to conform to copy what the majority is doing. Experiments show we'll copy 3 people doing something once each, rather than one person doing it 3 times. We're wired to follow the crowd.
And understanding intentions.
Absolutely. Our sophisticated theory of mind, perspective taking, reading intentions, all crucial for complex coordination and navigating social norms. And underpinning all this, there's evidence our brains have enhanced neuroplasticity, meaning our brains are exceptionally good at rewiring themselves based on experience, which facilitates learning, especially imitation and emulation. Our basic learning systems seem significantly upgraded for social learning.
So bringing this all home for our listeners, this deep dive makes it pretty clear, doesn't it? Our incredible ability to cooperate, the sheer scale of it, isn't just some random quirk. It seems fundamental to who we are as a species, driven by these really potent abilities for social learning, teaching, imitation, all shaped by these powerful feedback loops between our culture and our genes.
That's a great summary. Culture really did steer human evolution down paths that just weren't open to species without it. It amplified existing ways to cooperate, like reciprocity, but it also generated completely new mechanisms, like cultural group selection, that you just don't see elsewhere in nature. And the result, over millennia, is an evolved human psychology profoundly different from any other animals. It includes this enhanced drive and ability to learn from others, to teach, to communicate with language, to imitate, plus these built-in tendencies towards conforming to norms, tolerating others, sharing goals and attention. It's a whole package adapted for cultural life.
Which leaves us with a final thought, perhaps a provocative one for you, the listener. If the genetic differences between human groups are actually tiny compared to other apes, and if the huge differences we see between human societies are primarily down to cultural evolution, then it really suggests that while we undoubtedly built our complex world using our culture, that was only possible because evolution had already shaped our minds for culture. Our minds were fashioned for culture itself. What might that mean for how we think about our societies, our conflicts, and maybe